Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Here at The Cheap Audio Man, we help folks find high-value, hi-fi, home theater, and headphone equipment. And today, we're talking about the SVS Prime Tower. So, that's heavy. It's a bad idea. Sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the SVS Prime Tower. That was a bad idea. My days of picking up speakers and twisting laterally are probably over. Today's sponsor is Sith Audio audiophile reclaimed windows with a whole bunch of stains on them. That's right. If you need a window for a cabinet or anything else really, and you don't want to buy a new one, check out run all over to Sith Audio's website and choose from their wide variety of reclaimed dirty windows. Okay. The SVS Prime Towers. I did a video on the SVS Prime bookshelves, and well, I loved them. So much so that I ended up selling my beloved Klipsch RP600M and keeping the Primes. I think it's a heck of a bookshelf speaker at $500, but they're not $500 anymore. These used to be $1,000. They're not $1,000 anymore either. They're $1,200. And you shouldn't get upset at SVS because everybody is increasing their prices. So the Prime Towers, they're available in a couple of different colors, gloss black, and then this is the black ash. The black ash is a little bit less expensive, and I kind of prefer it. The piano gloss is gorgeous, and if one is interested in that type of a look, then it's very refined. But I prefer a little bit more of the matte black style of color. It's a vinyl wrap with wood grain finish. Looks real good. Looks real nice. The front is a matte black baffle that has recessed edges here on the side. SVS calls this a 3.5 way, which means the two woofers are actually reproducing different or are designed to reproduce different frequencies. It has a 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter and a 4.5-inch mid-range driver. Two 6.5-inch woofers. So there's some cool design considerations in this speaker. The mid-range driver is actually in its own internal enclosure. And then the two woofers each share their own individual port, so it doesn't interact with the other woofer, which is pretty cool. Reported frequency response is 30 hertz up to 25,000 hertz. And a frequency response on paper and in theory should tell one how deep the speaker goes and how high the speaker goes. But it's not always that simple. Oftentimes, frequency responses don't really match up to how the speaker performs, or at least how it performs to my ear. The Prime Towers have a sensitivity rating of 87 dB. What a sensitivity rating is how loud a speaker plays at a given power rating. So a speaker with a higher sensitivity will play louder at a lower power rating. 87 dB isn't too low, it's not really super efficient either, but most AV receivers, most amps aren't gonna have a problem driving the Prime Towers. They also have a nominal impedance of 8 ohms. Really, the only thing that means is this speaker is not gonna drop too low on impedance to shut your amp in. Some speakers that have a really low impedance, if you get a really big bass hit or something like that, it'll put your amplifier, receiver, whatever it is, into protect mode. All that being said, the SVS Prime Towers are not that difficult to drive, and most equipment's going to drive them with maybe the exception of some tube amps. On the back is one set of 5-way binding posts, so if you want to buy amp these, you're going to have to get into it, get into the crossover, and do it that way. Out of the box, you're not going to buy amp these. I don't think you need to. Crossover uses very good components. However, some might not think those components are good enough. If you believe that, you can get in there and upgrade the crossover yourself. And I'd imagine one may be able to eke out a little bit more performance from this speaker. However, I don't think that's necessary. But if you buy it and you're so inclined, it's your speaker, you can do whatever you want with it. You can put a horn on it, like a unicorn horn if you want to. Paint it red, paint it purple, put wheels on it. Speaking of putting wheels on it, I don't know why I said that, it comes with a couple of different feet. You can put some spikes on here, or it comes with some rubber feet as well. Just screws right into the bottom. I think this is a handsome speaker. I love the matte black finish on the baffle, and I love the color and style of the wrap. This doesn't scream high-end, hi-fi jewelry, but that's fine because I don't need hi-fi, high-end looking jewelry. Well built, well braced for a tower speaker. Speaking of towers, this speaker's pretty petite. 8 inches wide on the baffle, 36 inches high or 36.5 inches high, less than 12 inches deep, which means this speaker is going to be able to fit into a lot of places and not be super obtrusive in your living room. I've been running the Prime Towers in the upstairs media room, kids playroom, what have you. And I've used it on 2 different amplifiers. One is the Onkyo, it's what is it? TX-NR686. It's an older receiver. It's a 7-channel Atmos receiver. That's what I was using for, well, movies and television. For music, I put it through the Akatika PT102 preamp into the GT102 power amp. I was feeding that with the Denafreps Aries 2, and the Amazon Link streamer was providing streaming duties. For soundstage and imaging, when it came to TV and movies, I watched some Jurassic Park, Lost World, with my daughter. It was a lot of fun. Also watched Pennyworth. Fantastic show if you haven't watched it. It's about Albert Pennyworth, who later becomes Bruce Wayne's butler. Apparently he was a real tough character back in the day, back in England. It's a very cool show if you haven't watched it. Anyway, off of the Onkyo AVR receiver, the soundstage was great. Here's the deal though, you can't really judge soundstage and imaging when it comes to AVR and a surround sound receiver that has 17 different DSP things going on at the same time. Really, soundstage and imaging from a speaker needs to be judged on music. So that's what I did. I have an odd room up here where I have one speaker right in kind of a corner. So it really kind of beams out a lot of sound from there. So I have to pull the speakers out into the room and really away from the sidewall on the left to get really good imaging and soundstage. The good news is I was able to get that out of the SVS Prime Towers. Some speakers is very difficult to get to image and soundstage well up here. I found that when they were about a foot from the wall, they soundstaged and imaged okay. When I brought them about 3 feet out in the room, they soundstaged and imaged really on par with just about anything. These don't throw a huge lateral soundstage, but what they do is have a very balanced soundstage from side to side and some depth in the soundstage. So on Nirvana MTV Unplugged, there was definite forward and aft imaging as well as side to side imaging. Chocolate Chip Trip by Tool was very seamless when I got them out into the room. When I had them closer to the wall, maybe it jumped a little bit. It's not a problem with the speaker, this is a problem with my room. Overall, soundstage and imaging is just fine. I think you're only going to improve upon this with something like a KEF or an ELAC with concentric drivers, really throwing things out wide. But the SVS Prime Tower keeps up with all of its competition, i.e. Emotiva, T1 Plus, Klipsch RP6000F. This does just fine. It's really in line with all of its competition out there. Let's talk about bass. Bass. So bass on this speaker is quite balanced. Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys, a speaker will give an impression of just how big and deep that song goes if it's got maybe a little bit of boosted bass, or more importantly, if it has very good bass roll-off. This speaker did a good job of rolling off punch in your face type of a bass. Didn't mean to make a rhyme. Wasn't as prevalent as it is with like the Klipsch RP6000F. However, I don't think the speaker is meant to be that way. The amount of bass on the SVS Prime Tower is more in line, more balanced than on the Klipsch. If you're wanting smack you in the face type of bass, not from an extension standpoint, from an amount standpoint, then the Klipsch has the SVS Prime Tower beat. However, if one is looking for a more balanced response, the SVS Prime Tower does probably a better job than the Klipsch RP6000F. Tone and texture was great. So What by Miles Davis off of Kind of Blue was detailed and enjoyable. Killing Strangers by Marilyn Manson was the same. Bit more punchy than Intergalactic, but not as punchy as some other speakers. But to be fair, those other speakers would have a very much of a V-shaped or U-shaped sound signature. Bass on the primes is going to be just fine. Even when I had them pulled way out in the room, the sound signature was very balanced, bass was there, and it was just the right amount. Let's talk about mid-range. Mid-range on this speaker is a little bit leaning to the cool side. So male vocals aren't as baritone-y or as rich as some other speakers, like a Wharfdale Diamond 11.4, which again you can't get, so it's really not a good comparison. Lane Staley, Alice in Chains, MTV Unplugged. His voice seemed neither thin nor rich. It was just not clinical, but balanced. Again, that's going to be the recurring theme with this speaker. This speaker is balanced. However, if you were looking for something that leans a little bit warm, something like the ELAC debut reference 6.2 or whatever, that speaker leans a little bit buttery. Mid-range on the SVS Prime is balanced, a little bit cool. However, female vocals get a little bit more attention and stand out a little bit more from the mix. On the SVS Prime Tower, Lena Hall, her cover of Creep, was quite good. Also, one thing to consider on that song, at the 2-minute 20-second point, she goes really high up. It can reveal speakers' limitations at the 2-minute 20-second mark. So if you haven't heard that song, go listen to that song and listen for the 2-minute 20-second. Prime Tower handled it wonderfully. So mid-range, balanced, leans a bit cool. Let's talk about treble. Treble on the SVS Primes is quite good, but it does have that aluminum dome sound signature. And what that sound signature is, some prominence in there. It's still in line with the rest of the frequency response, but there is a characteristic of aluminum dome tweeters that the SVS Prime has. When I'm comparing an aluminum dome to something like what is in the Emotiva T1 Plus, T0 Plus, T2 Plus, B1 Plus, when I'm comparing that, the Emotiva has a bit more separation and detail associated with the treble. However, an aluminum dome has a tendency to cooperate a little bit better when it comes to soundstage and imaging. So an aluminum dome tweeter may be a little bit more brief than an AMT or whatever tweeter they have in the Emotiva, but what you lose in a little bit of detail, you'll gain back in soundstage and imaging. SVS does a great job of integrating aluminum dome tweeters. You still get excitement, you still get prominence, you still get a ton of detail, but it's not overpowering. And this does not seem like a V-shaped speaker. Maybe a slight U-shaped speaker, but when you get them out into the room, I think these have a fairly balanced sound signature. Maybe a bit of a rise in the treble. Cymbals were clear and organic, but again, just like the mid-range, leans a bit cool. Harvester of Sorrow by Metallica, the cymbals maybe a bit spicy at times, but for most people, this sound signature is going to be very attractive. What are my final thoughts? Final thoughts on the SVS Prime Tower is this is a very good, what I would call a Goldilocks speaker for both music and movies and television. There's plenty of cleanliness, plenty of detail, so dialogue is going to sound fantastic. It's not as emphasized in any specific frequency response, so for music lovers, for people that want a more linear frequency response, the SVS Prime is probably going to be a better fit for those over what I would call the Klipsch. As far as comparing this to the Emotiva T1 Plus, they have some similar characteristics. The difference is I think the T1 Plus has a bit more clarity on the top end, but the SVS Prime Tower does a better job of imaging and soundstage while still maintaining that excitement on top. If you're looking for mid-range warmth or overall warm sound signature, the SVS Prime Tower probably isn't for you. But if you're looking for a speaker that's going to handle music and movies perfectly, at a very competitive price point, then I think you should take a hard look at these. The Emotiva T1 Plus comes in around $700 for a pair. So this one is $500 more expensive. The Klipsch RP6000F, I think, come in around the same price. So I think there's three choices here. The Klipsch, very exciting, very forward, lively presentation, not necessarily as linear as a lot of people would like. Some people are going to love that sound signature for music, some people aren't. The SVS has a sound signature that a lot of people are going to enjoy, but if one loves Klipsch, they should probably stick with Klipsch. If one wants something more balanced, then the Prime is more balanced than the Klipsch. But the Klipsch RP6000F is going to hit like a hammer, or a sailor on leave. Overall, the SVS is built wonderfully, sounds great, has a cool leaning in the mids and the treble, has that aluminum dome sound signature, but it's not too much. Very balanced, great looking speaker, and is going to do a great job with music and movies. If you put a little bit of EQ on these, you're going to be able to warm them up if you want, maybe bring down the treble if you want to. This speaker takes EQ really well because it's very in the middle already. And it already sounds good, so if you want to tweak things, you certainly can. A lot of AVR receivers have built-in EQs. I love the size because this can fit in most people's living room or most people's bedroom. It's not huge. It's not nearly as deep as the Klipsch. A lot of versatility to this. You can put them up against the wall for movies and TV, and you can bring them out a little bit into the room if you're listening to music. I'm not saying you have to do that, but you're going to get an improvement on the soundstage and imaging. You're going to reduce any boominess in the bass. But the good thing about the bass on this is it's not so prominent that having it close to the wall is really going to muddy things up or cover up the mids. It's a very good, very balanced speaker. And I'm not saying I'm surprised that it's this refined, but it's very refined. And I'm so glad that it exists because this is a fantastic choice among the tower speakers that are in this price category. I don't think you're going to be disappointed if you pick up the SVS Prime Towers. So if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every Sunday night, we have Patreon-only Zooms. We also have a Patreon-only Facebook group. You can also sign up for Amazon Music or Tidal. There are links in the description. If you sign up for a trial, I will get a little bit of a commission. You can also purchase the SVS Prime Towers through the links. Those are affiliate links, which means if you buy through those links, I will get a commission. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu unless it's pennyworth on HBO Max through the SVS Prime Towers. Binge listen and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.